So, this is going to be one of those really long videos with a lot of information. So, I'm going to do my best to take my time. This video is being recorded on Saturday, the 17th of April at 6:52. I'm just saying that now because there might be like loads of information that comes out on Monday, and you might be like, "Yo, where's this new information?" And I'll be like, "Bruv, recording and editing, scheduling." And yeah, so if loads of new information comes out next week, then I'll do another video to this. But Dave, why couldn't you retire to a farm or something? Why did you have to get involved in this company? Honestly, so far, what do we know? So this article written, I think it was like within the last day. I'm just gonna double check that. Yes. So far, we know that David Cameron went on. He waited 2 years. So he resigned in 2016, and in 2018 he took a job with Greensill, which is the law for ministers and senior civil servants. I'm pretty sure for civil servants. And he went on to work for basically as a lobbyist for this company Greensill. Greensill are like a finance capital fintech thing, which give companies access to low cost credit. So essentially, you can get access to money that doesn't have high interest rates, among other things I think they're involved in. But they've gone bankrupt now, and David Cameron would have made a lot of money off the shares of Greensill because they were hoping to go on the stock market. Also involved in this is a Crown representative, which isn't as fancy as it sounds, and another senior civil servant. So yeah, lots of people involved in this, and this story is very painful to listen to. So if this one isn't for you, Chief, then happily click off the video because this will be long and very boring. So what do we know so far about what David Cameron specifically has done? He texted Rishi Sunak asking for the company to be included in a COVID-related loan scheme. Also, Rishi Sunak texted back saying that I've got the team doing everything they can to get around whatever barriers they were, especially since they were handing money left, right, and centre. It's very strange that Dave couldn't get his buddies a loan at Greensill. Very strange. Dave also contacted Treasury Ministers Jesse Norman and John Glenn about the company. So he was trying to, bypass Sunak and go directly to Treasury Ministers, Sunak's juniors, to get loans and to, probably get them to push, Sunak to make a decision. But we don't know for certain because not all the text messages have been released, and it's very doubtful they will be. He also met with Matt Hancock privately at some sort of like drink event, social gathering in 2019 to discuss a new payment scheme for NHS staff. So, Matt Hancock says everything was above board, but, if they're going to talk business, he shouldn't have been in that environment. It's very dodgy. So Greensill Capital has now gone bust, throwing the future of thousands of workers at Liberty Steel, a company backed by the finance firm, into doubt. So the knock-on effect of a company like Greensill Capital going bust is that it impacts the borrowers and the companies being financed by them. And you could argue that was a good reason why the government should have got involved. But at the same time, how much money did this small how much money did this firm actually have to give out? That's the key question. If you start lending excessive amounts, and you have problems when a pandemic hits, because your investor money runs out, or whatever the case with Greensill, that's on you, big boy. So Labour has criticised the scope of the review which Boris Johnson is doing. We'll talk about the review and how dodgy it is, and later on in the video. But yeah, the Conservative Party also voted down a motion by Labour to have a full-on inquiry, a Commons inquiry into this, and to go into depth about who was involved and which ministers were spoken to specifically. The Conservative Party said no to that. I wonder why. So yeah. There are unanswered questions. So the Sunday Times investigation claims many in Whitehall had serious reservations about Greensill's original employment as a special advisor. He wasn't paid for this, and so the only reason why a rich guy like Greensill or a rich person like Greensill would do unpaid advisory work is because they're networking. They're looking for connections. Greensill was obviously doing this within the civil service, etc., to try and network with people, to try and talk to people, which kind of explains how he managed to get one member of the civil service to leave the civil service to join him at Greensill. He was networking. Mr. Cameron's statement does not specifically does not specify how much he was paid when he went to work for Greensill. He had shares in the company, but he denies claims that he told friends he was set to earn as much as 60 million from them. Unless he had a lot of shares, it's very unlikely he would have earned that amount. Cameron did also not declare whether he lobbied any other minister, so chances are he probably has done. That's the reason why he hasn't denied it. Who else has been involved? So it's been revealed that a senior civil servant took a part-time job as an advisor at Greensill Capital in 2015 while he was working on the civil service payroll. So again, the reason why I believe anyways that Greensill got involved working within government as an unpaid advisor was he was networking, and he managed to fish out this civil servant. That was one of the things he got, and his name is Bill Crothers. The name of the civil servant says his appointment was agreed by the Cabinet Office, but he didn't go to the ACABO, the ones who are meant to deal with this sort of stuff when it comes to ethics, I believe, and he did not actually speak to them. Crothers says it was a mistake, but it was Eric Pickles, who's in charge of ACABA, said, "Nah, bro, that's not going to fly here." So, Eric Pickles a Tory as well. So, it does show you how dodgy this whole situation is. It says here, government departments have been ordered to find out by the end of the week, so that would have been last week when you're listening to this, whether senior officials have paid roles or outside interests that might conflict with their civil service roles. And so typically what happens is when certain MPs or whatever, even MPs should not have advisory roles because it's a conflict of interest. But what happens is certain, prime ministers, apart from Gordon Brown and other MPs, they go on to have lobbying gigs because it's not because they're good at the job specifically, it's because they know people within government, and that's how they get around, they kind of get around the secretaries and stuff. You go directly to the person, you text them on their personal phone, because if Cameron didn't do that, he would have to email whoever deals with the emails for Sunak, so that would be his secretary, something like that, and that can take time. Instead, you go directly to the person, and that saves you time. That's the reason why a lot of these people go on to get advisory roles. You see that specifically with the certain MPs within the Conservative Party who have advisory roles to firms who have gotten COVID contracts. That's something the National Audit Office, I believe, spoke about as well, where they said that it's very suspicious that so many Conservative Party donors and friends got contracts. It's because they went directly to the source to get this stuff. That's why Cameron spoke to Sunak to get financing for his company, to get a COVID loan for his company. That's the reason why he did it. Questions have been asked about the sustainability of Greensill's business since at least 2018, but the final blow came last July when one of its insurance companies withdrew cover that protected some of Greensill's investors. So that investor money is basically run out because they're not going to be covered by this insurance company. Liberty Steel, Britain's third largest steel producer, employing 3,000 people in England, Scotland and Wales, was receiving financial backing from Greensill. Its future is now in doubt, which makes sense because if they were receiving money from Greensill because they needed it because of the pandemic or for whatever reason, if they can't get access to those funds now, it's a bust because they were most likely getting access to low cost capital from Greensill, and maybe they had a difficult time getting loans from the government and for banks for whatever reason. That's why they went to Greensill, but they're in doubt now, and they employ a lot of people, I believe. Third largest steel manufacturer in the UK, something we could use for infrastructure. So we've got decent analysis from Laura Koonsberg. Very surprising, I know, but it mentions here about what happened. So Lex Greensill, whose bank just collapsed, was revealed to have worked as an advisor to the government at the behest of the country's then most senior Mandarin, Lord Hayward. So this guy is obviously very good at networking because he managed to know one of the senior Mandarin, who is one of the Mandarins are senior civil servants. So this guy obviously has very good networking skills, hence why he took that job as a unpaid advisor, because that's what he was doing with his time. Sources working in Whitehall at the time acknowledged that Greensill had a desk in government and was someone whose ideas were listened to, but rejected the notion that he was a central figure. But the thing is, just by him having input is very dodgy, considering it's very doubtful he was vetted properly, and the fact that he could lobby on behalf of his own projects or projects he has some sort of link to. So it's very stupid that this man was allowed to have the role within government that he had. It says here, but his work did have an impact, helping to convince the government to get involved in what is known as supply chain finance, helping small and medium-sized businesses get their hands on money owed to them and making it easier for them to get credit. This was announced back in 2012. So just because he's done a good thing doesn't mean that him being in that position was right. And it's very likely that he may have made some bad decisions, but he hasn't been outed, because then it further implicates Whitehall in allowing an unpaid advisor to have bigger influence within the government. That's why they've touted a success story instead of a failure. In embarrassing detail, over the last few weeks, it's been reported that David Cameron appealed to former colleagues on the bank's behalf at the start of the pandemic, sending texts to the Chancellor and emailing officials. There's a reason why he emailed them directly, as I've mentioned before, because he didn't have time to waste. This company was struggling financially, and he had no other choice but to use his connections. Not saying he was the right thing to do, but it shows you why a 2-year lobbying gap between being in government within certain senior roles and working as a lobbyist or an advisor for a firm is too short. It's too short because David Cameron knows these people still. It should be 10 to 15 years once a full turnover in government has happened. Because then, if, say, for example, it was, say, Labour are in charge now and Annalise Dodds was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, there's no way David Cameron will be able to message her. He wouldn't have her number for a start, and if he messaged her saying, I need, we know each other, blah, 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 and I need financing for this company and access to COVID loans, she'd probably tell him to get lost, because they're not friends like that. Well, at least I hope they're not friends like that. And some months before arranging private drinks with the Health Secretary and meetings with other senior NHS officials about an app to help NHS staff manage their pay, Greensill would have made money from that. Says there is nothing wrong with suggesting ideas to the government or trying to change ministers' minds. Charities, unions, campaign groups and individuals do it all the time, but because decisions made in Whitehall affect millions of us and cost billions of pounds, contracts and conversations are meant to be properly and transparently done. That's the reason why you have open transparency. You have everything logged, because these decisions cost money, taxpayers' money, regardless of how much it is. And Greensill getting this contract to do, whatever this is, having, let's just check again, about, an app to help NHS staff manage their pay. If Greensill got this contract above another company that had a similar idea because they had connections, shows you how dodgy things are. And there's a reason why everything has to be transparent, because we have to know that the taxpayer got the best bang for their buck. That's the point. That's why you have these rules. In other words, decisions that can involve millions of pounds of public money aren't meant to be made over a few WhatsApps or texts between old mates. That's why you have transparency. Again, this is good work for Laura Kuenssberg. I'm very surprised. One of those who the former Prime Minister tried to lobby told me it was classic casual Cameron, but was adamant that ministers did the right thing and channeled his request to back to official route. So, they did not give him what he wanted. And that's one of the reasons why I think the firm collapsed, because Cameron couldn't get the funding because they just didn't play ball. People within the government didn't want to play ball with him. But the simple fact he was able to talk to them is a scandal. And the fact that Sunak said to him, I'm doing everything I can. The team's doing everything they can to try and push through your request. It's very dodgy because no one else has access like that. The vast majority of people do not have access to government officials like that to push their requests through. That's why this is a scandal, to me at least. True enough, Greensill was not allowed to be involved in the catchily titled COVID Corporate Financing Facility, the Treasury and Bank of England emergency loan scheme, but the business was able to take part in a different scheme through government-owned but separately run British Business Bank. So it's not clear if Cameron's kind of pushing Sunak and the rest of the gang to do this is the reason why Greensill were a part of this firm, or were they there on merit? And that's the problem. That's what makes the water murkier, because we don't know if they got that money on by merit or because they're boys. Cameron and Sunak are boys. Again, that's what makes things even dodgier. Cameron said he should have went through formal channels, but there's a reason why you didn't, big man. Because you weren't getting the responses I assumed you needed, and you were rejected at first advance. So that's why you most likely went through these channels. I could be wrong, but that's what I think, anyways. His allies suggest that he was genuinely trying to help at a time of crisis when the government was scrambling to help business. This is a guy who, when he was in charge in 2010, caused massive problems through austerity and other policies, tax cuts, privatising Royal Mail at a low cost, lower price shares. So get lost. He's trying to help people. Don't do this, Laura. You're doing so well. they reject too the notion that Cameron should somehow have known that Greensill was already in trouble, as the recent collapse now suggests. He was not on the board of the company and could not therefore know it. Therefore, he could not therefore, it is suggested, have understood the depths of the problem. But there's a reason why Mr. Lex Greensill hired him and pushed Cameron to get these loans. There's a reason why he did that, because Cameron has connections. So obviously he should have guessed that things were desperate. It says here, the rules for full-time professional lobbyists apply to external consultants, but not those actually on company payrolls, as Cameron was for Greensill. So he did avoid some of the the rules around lobbying by the looks of things. The status of a former prime minister a long time after they've left number 10 is a particular and extremely useful. That's a weird way to phrase it. Most of that is a tiny exclusive club who have gone on to earn vast sums, except Gordon Brown. Yeah, big up Gordon Brown, despite all the bad things he did. At least he's the best one out of a lot of these maggots. So, this is Labour talking, saying that Boris Johnson must launch a full inquiry into David Cameron's attempts to lobby ministers on behalf of the finance firm. The ex-Prime Minister's work for Greensill Capital has been heavily scrutinised, with a government-backed investigation set up. Nothing much is going to come up with that. Johnson said that, the person who's put in charge of this inquiry would have carte blanche to ask anyone the questions that need to be answered. But Labour said the probe has the hallmarks of a cover-up, which we'll be talking about in a minute. So we know that Tory MPs have voted down a Commons inquiry into the Greensill lobbying scandal. At the moment the inquiry is wholly inadequate, and it's chaired by a good friend of the Conservatives. It does tell you how bad it's going to be. But the Prime Minister ordered Tories to vote against Labour plans for the row to be examined by a new parliamentary committee. So it's very obvious the reason why they're not allowing this is because there's obviously something going on here, and the Conservative Party don't want people to know about this. But in this case, the cover-up may be worse than the actual findings of the inquiry, depending on the actual details, because the chances are this stuff could come out. The details about the inquiry could come out, or details about the argument and the whole situation could come out, and it might make the Conservative Party look worse, especially since I hope that this thing drags on for a while, so people keep talking about it, people keep listening about what's going on. So in a blistering attack on Boris Johnson's failure to tackle Cameron's sleaze, Labour said lawyer Nigel Boardman whitewashed a previous inquiry and is a very good friend of the Conservative Party. So Rachel Reeves accused the son of a Tory peer and a director at the business department of whitewashing a previous review into government contracts during the pandemic. I think she's talking about Boardman. And she said Slaughter and May, which has been employed by Mr. Boardman since 1973, made £8 million advising Carillion. They've gone bankrupt, including £1 million on the day before the outsourcers collapsed. So they've made money off this stuff, of these companies that have now collapsed. Mr. Boardman's review will look at behind-the-scenes contact between government and Mr. Cameron on behalf of Greensill Capital, who employed him. So, the Labour Party is saying this is very dodgy, that, this guy Boardman is clearly boys with the Tory Party. He's a consultant at Slaughter and May. Slaughter and May lobbied against tightening lobbying laws. So clearly this man here doesn't believe that there's an issue in the first place, and therefore will not find any issues. That's how it works. If you do not believe institutional racism exists, you will not find any. So here we got the scandal over Greensill's Capital's influence within the government has deepened as it emerged. So this is kind of the second half of the video where we talk about the other members involved within Greensill Capital. This is going on for a while. It's going to be a very long video, so apologies for that. So the scandal over Greensill Capital's influence within government has deepened as it emerged one of Britain's most senior civil servants began working as an advisor to the firm. It was an unpaid role whilst working with the Whitehall. So this guy was working as a civil servant for a while, and a senior civil servant, and he was working unpaid at this company Greensill. Blatant conflict of interest there. He'd have various connections within government to enable this company to lobby to get contracts, etc., especially since this guy apparently worked in procurement, which enables him again to know exactly who to speak to about getting this Greensill company contracts, etc. So Downing Street and Cabinet Office sources were said to be deeply concerned about the revelation that official approval was given for Bill Crothers to begin advising Greensill in 2015 while still employed in the civil servants. Crothers, who was the government's chief commercial officer, left that role 2 months later and went on to become a director of Greensill, gaining a shareholding potentially worth £8 million, £5.8 million before the lender had collapsed. So this guy would have made money from this. They obviously gave him a lucrative deal, and the question is it because he's very good at his role, or is it because he has connections, or a combination of the two? I would argue it's a combination of the two. So Crothers has denied any wrongdoing, and said such roles were not uncommon, a claim that has caused alarm within Downing Street, because obviously this means that this stuff happens regularly, and the idiots at Downing Street had no idea this was going on. So the Guardian understands that Number 10 has ordered an inquiry to examine the approval process that meant Crothers was given leave to advise the company while still an impartial civil servant. So clearly, whoever's given him this advice may have been wrong to do so. So apparently, the approval was given by this man John Manzoni. So he gets mentioned a few times. So Crothers worked as a government's chief commercial officer between 2012 to 2015, helping to create the Crown Commercial Service, an agency of the Cabinet Office, and earning up to £149,000 a year, so a very well-paid gig. He left the civil servants 2 months later after beginning an advisory role with Greensill. So he set up this Crown Commercial Service, which is something we'll speak about in a few minutes, because someone else from that Crown Commercial Service has been wrapped up into this as well. So in a letter, Crothers said he was given approval to take up part-time board advisory role with Greensill starting from September 2015, whilst employed as a civil servant. So the question is, why did Manzoni give him this approval? And also Akaba was not spoken to. They're the ones who are meant to advise on this sort of stuff. He did not speak to them. He said Greensill was then a small firm which did not conduct any business with the UK government. Crothers added the advisory role was not seen as contentious, as I believe not uncommon. So Crothers' excuse is other people are doing it, so I don't see the issue here. And that's a problem if that's the case. That's a problem that other civil servants with deep knowledge of how the government works and who exactly to speak to get certain contracts and funding, not great. Especially since Crothers was obviously offered a lot of shares within the company in exchange for his job at Greensill. The Cabinet Office is understood not to keep records of how many civil servants have advisory roles to firms. Like, why is this the case? You create such a conflict of interest. You don't know how impartial the advice senior civil servants are giving you, or civil servants are giving you, because they could have advisory roles for a firm and have a conflict of interest there. They might see it as it's their role to get this firm money, so they're going to give you advice that might benefit that firm. And even if that's not the case for them, in their heart of hearts, they're like, no, I gave the best advice I could. The optics of it alone are very bad. One former cabinet minister said, we have to be able to trust that a civil servant does not have a second job and is completely impartial and have a public register of their interests as we have for MPs. But the thing is, they should have no outside interest. They get paid about £150,000, but I think some of them on about 100k a year. That's kind of the lower end of it. They should have no outside interest. They get a fat pension as well. This is ridiculous. So Eric Pickles, the head of Akaba, has said that a lack of transparency around this part-time job employment with Greensill may have left the misleading impression that Mr. Crothers had willfully ignored the obligation to seek advice. Company records show Crothers incorporated his own management consultancy in 2015. So not only is this man a civil servant, but he also runs a consultancy firm. It gets very dodgy, especially since he works in procurement. So if you ran a company that wanted to get contracts from the government, you could speak to him and he'd give you the inside scoop on what's going on by the looks of things. Shocking. Now, Mr. Crothers' former department had no concerns about him setting up a consultancy. So clearly, whoever these jokers are very stupid. Very, very stupid, and don't understand what conflicts of interest are. Especially since this man Manzoni seems to be at the heart of it. After leaving office, Crothers had at least 5 meetings with Whitehall officials between 2016 and 2020. So he obviously knows the people to speak to, and this is the problem. Not everyone has access to people like this. He could call them over and be like, yo, do you want to meet for a drink, and talk business on the sly and get the scoop, what he has to do to get around certain hurdles. This is wrong. I don't know how to stress that enough. This is wrong. So transparency records show that Crothers had met Manzoni. They describe the discussion as relating to commercial capability, stakeholder relationship, and business issues. Crothers is not declared as having approached Manzoni on behalf of any private company, so he's just having a casual discussion about these things whilst also working for Greensill. Like, give me a break. This is a load of rubbish. Crothers also attended a private drinks meeting between the Health Secretary Matt Hancock, Cameron, and Greensill. So this man's obviously involved. He's deeply involved in this. This is a deep-rooted rot within the government and the civil service. Hancock said he attended the meeting, but said it was organised by Cameron, and that given departmental business came up, he reported it to officials in the normal way. But the thing is, if you're meeting these people for drinks and having a casual conversation, how do you remember exactly what was spoken about? It's ridiculous. Though Hancock said his actions were appropriate and within the rules, those are two different things here. One can be within the rules and inappropriate. One can be within the rules and immoral. And clearly if he can do this, if this is within the rules have to change. It raises questions about why it had not been known before that he flagged the discussion of departmental business with civil servants. So it sounds like maybe he didn't really tell many people. I'm not sure. The government has refused to explain why Hancock's comments on the discussions with Greensill that concerned departmental business were not published as part of his quarterly transparency publications, which tells you that either the government didn't think this is a big deal, or Hancock's lying and he told them later on. That I don't know which one it could be, but there's options there. So if it was revealed that Crothers, if the company was successfully floated on the stock market for $7 billion, Crothers, who had a significant stake in the business, could have made a lot of money, considering that there was apparently some sort of $7 billion valuation, which, all right then. Instead, the company collapsed into administration, so, I don't know what to make of the $7 billion, valuation they had. It says here, this is about the Labour inquiry, would have demanded that the government publishes all communications relating to Greensill Capital between Cameron, Johnson, Hancock and Sunak, as well as special advisors and senior staff. Labour didn't get that, and it does show you that Labour, being intelligent and pushing this vote in Parliament gives them more ammunition to say the Conservatives don't care about being open and transparent because they're trying to bury this thing. They've got a very dodgy person to hold out to do the inquiry, who's probably not going to find much wrong because it looks like fundamentally he doesn't believe that there's any problem. So therefore he's not going to find any problems. But yeah, credit the Labour Party for once, at least doing something better than what they normally do, which is, I agree with the government, but this is what I would do differently. So you've got the former head of the civil service. He said he was baffled. He's baffled that approval for a top civil servant to take a job at Greensill Capital while still on government payroll. He's baffled by the fact that he was allowed to do this. Lord Kerslake, I think that's how you pronounce that, said he could see no circumstances which Bill Crothers' appointment at the financial firm could have been acceptable. So Manzoni has some questions to answer here. The government has ordered a review which will look into his role. I think it's about Manzoni's role and Bill Crothers. So the National Audit Office, which monitors public spending, has also launched an investigation into Greensill's involvement in the government's COVID-19 financial support scheme. So hopefully the NAO finds something if there's anything there. So Lord Kerslake said he was shocked and concerned at recent revelations that legitimate concerns about how Mr. Crothers, who was able to hold dual roles, needed to be thoroughly investigated, because it's a massive conflict of interest, as I've said multiple times. He led on procurement, an area of absolute intense scrutiny. So, for anyone who doesn't know specifically what procurement is the process of finding and agreeing to terms and acquiring goods, services, or works from external source. So this man was an expert in exactly how the government procured contracts, goods, whatever, services, and or goods, okay? That's why he was involved. So he knows, this man Crothers knows exactly who to speak to when it comes to talking with ministers and civil servants. That's why there's a huge conflict of interest here. So this man's specific role in procurement is a huge problem. When it was Greensill who was trying to get contracts and funding from the government, he knows exactly how to get it, even though he failed in the end, but still. And he had a massive share in it too, because if he was successful and this company Greensill managed to float themselves on the stock market, he would have made bank because he could have sold his shares. So Kirkslake goes on to say, while the effect of what he did, if not the intent, was to bypass the rules set out by the watchdog Aqaba that advises ministers and officials outside of employment, the situation was that Greensill were active in government even if they didn't have a contract. So I'm personally baffled as to how this got approved. So Greensill obviously had a lot of impact within the government. They had a former Prime Minister, they had a top don in Crothers, and they had another dude as well. Also, the fact that Lex Greensill was also had some influence and obviously knew people within government because he had his own desk. Mr. Crothers' appointment by joined Greensill. What, that doesn't make sense. Crothers' appointment by Greensill received the go-ahead from the Cabinet Office, but he did not consult Aqaba. It emerged on Thursday that he also failed to alert it about another job. So he failed to tell them he was a trustee with a Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. So again, this man who has a job within government for procurement had another role as a trustee for a company called the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. So a man who worked in the government, who has expertise in how exactly the government gives out contracts and gets services, was also hired by a company that looks like they deal with procurement and supply. Is anyone seeing the problem here? Mr. Crothers apologised in a letter to Aqaba saying that he had described it as an honest mistake, blah blah blah. Eric Pickles said he broke the law, so we'll see what happens with that. The Guardian newspaper has reported further links between Greensill and the civil service, so when more information about that comes out, we'll speak about it. But so far, we have that David Greensill combined a role as a Crown representative in the years in the Cabinet Office with being a director at Greensill. So what is a Crown representative? So the Crown representative have to ensure a single public strategic view of the government's needs is communicated to the market. So this guy, he knows exactly what the government is looking for when it comes to contracts, etc. Identify areas for cost saving, act as a point of focus for cost cutting supply related issues. That's what Greensill were trying to do in certain areas, I believe. Crown representatives also cover all sectors of service provisions, including small and medium enterprises, small like Greensill, maybe, voluntary sector organisations, mutually owned organisations, large suppliers, etc. So this man here, David Briarwood, he works, again, looks like procurement again, really. Sorry, not procurement, but he speaks to the private sector and says, look, these are what the things the government needs. And he looks at things like cost cutting. So again, he was another one hired because he has expertise in how the government does procurement, how the government does, how the government speaks to the private sector. Again, these people were specifically chosen, and I would not be surprised if Lex Greensill specifically looked for these types of people to work for his company whilst he was there within government as a unpaid advisor. That's what this man, again, was doing, networking. Come on, people. So a cabinet spokesperson said, Crown representatives do not participate in procurement process, nor are they able to award contracts. But they're in your ear, though. They're in the minister's ears, are they? Giving you advice and stuff? No. They are senior part-time executives recruited for their working knowledge of a sector to help ensure value for money for the taxpayer. Did you get that from Greensill? Did you? All Crown representatives go through regular proprietary checks. Again, okay, all right then. So Starmer said, this has gone wider than a single incident. He had a story after story of cronyism, contracts for mates, which, again, Boris Johnson giving him some open goals there, Starmer starts scoring. Boris Johnson saying the most important thing is get to the bottom of this. So, yeah, we've got Eric Big Man Pickles saying that there did not appear to be any boundaries at all between civil servants and the private sector. That's a huge problem because it creates a conflict of interest for civil servants who do advise ministers. Labour said, things are becoming murkier and lobbyists have an open door to government, which is true because, these civil servants look like some of them are up for sale and they will happily give out their services to other companies. Some, not all. I guarantee most of them are probably all right. But, there seems to be a few, at least, that work within advising government. We got Crothers and the other guy, Brian something, or whatever his name is. Let's just go back. Yeah, David Briarwood seems to be an issue. Johnson said he agreed with Eric Pickles to get something done, so do something then. There was a bit more here. Former government ministers and top civil servants are never short of job offers. But what sort of work should they be allowed to do? This is an analysis from Brian Wheeler. Lord Pickle's Akaba committee is meant to ensure that they don't use their insider knowledge and contracts to enrich themselves for 2 years after leaving government. Again, that window has to open massively. It has to be 10 years. The Akaba committee has long been criticised for being toothless, and Eric Pickles appears to agree. As things stand, he is neither a watchdog nor a regulator. So essentially, he has no power. So there's that. If you go further down, he said contractors and consultants to the government should have to sign a memorandum of understanding about the restrictions that would be placed on them after leaving their public sector work, which again is decent. So these are, what inquiries are being held. So there's a government commission one we spoke about, which is a joke. The head of the civil service, Simon Case, has ordered all government departments to disclose senior staff with second jobs and outside interests by the end of the week. So that should have been done already by the time you listen to this. Hopefully, Treasury Select Committee announced investigations into Greensill Capital on Tuesday. The people on the Treasury Select Committee are mainly Tories, but Select Committees generally do a good job. So let's hope this is the case, that they do some decent work. Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee has just announced its own inquiry into topical issues arising around Greensill. So there's multiple inquiries happening here. Cabinet Office review of the Lobbying Act, Commons Public Accounts Committee as well. So there's so much going on here. So many inquiries and stuff that are happening. So it'd be important to keep an eye on them. And we know that this civil servant failed to declare he had a second job, and he should have told Akaba, and he didn't. The advisory committee on business appointments, he should have told them and he didn't. He says it's a mistake. I'm not sure about that. And we go to kind of the Cliff Notes version of this video, I suppose, which is that. So David Cameron hired Greensill as an unpaid advisor. Greenhill hired Cameron as a paid advisor. Cameron lobbied Sunak. Cameron lobbied ministers. Cameron lobbied civil servants. Prime Minister announces public inquiry. Inquiry headed by Nigel Boardman. He's consultant. Slaughter and May lobbied against tightening lobbying laws. So that means that this guy most likely has no intent to actually, in his inquiry, to find out what happened to it. And as we've spoken about with the police before, the evidence isn't there if you don't look for it. Can't find evidence if you don't look. It's not there. And so the point of this video is to say that most likely there'll be no decent outcomes of some of these inquiries. Hopefully the select committees do a good job, but I don't have that much faith in them. But what it does show you, there's a deep rot within the government, and it stems to the civil service as well as other departments, and something needs to be done. And start pushing on this man, start really kicking at him for this, because link it to the COVID contracts. Do something, please, because man, this cannot keep going. This is scary stuff. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Spoken for a long time. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.